Thanks for tuning in to the SEI Cultivating Connections podcast, where we highlight creative initiatives that bring communities together, as well as strategies that you can use to build bridges across differences. I'm David Crowley, president and founder of SEI and your podcast host. Today, I'm excited to share a conversation with George R. Greenidge Jr., known as Chip to friends and colleagues. Chip is a leader I've had the pleasure of knowing for over 2 decades, so this was a great opportunity to catch up and get his insights on topics related to community building, mentoring, and racial justice. George has served in several capacities throughout his career in nonprofit, government, philanthropy, and education fields. His current roles include serving as a Democracy Visiting Fellow at the Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation at the Harvard Kennedy School. He is also a PhD candidate in sociology at Georgia State University. Be sure to check out our show notes for a more full biography because now it's time to turn to our conversation. Well, hello, George Chip Greenidge. It's great to have you on this podcast.
I am so glad to be here and been a fan of SCI for many years. I know I've known you for, I hate to say it, I think 30, 30, no, 25 years,
It's
maybe.
got to be in that range, man.
Oh
25,
my
30
Lord.
years. It's a sign when you start talking with folks that you go back decades with. But yeah, that's awesome. I was thinking of you were in I knew you wore many hats in your career. You had your philanthropy hat on at the Boston Foundation doing a site visit when we first
Oh,
met.
that was such a fun time in my life, especially
Yeah.
being 20 in your like mid to late 20s. And I got to explore the city of Boston like I'd never been there before. Like I would go to East Boston, which I never really been to,
Right.
do site visits, and I would do to South Boston and different places. And it's so interesting now, David, as you look at philanthropy these days, is that, I had a boss by the name of Anna Faith Jones who
Oh,
would
sure.
encourage,
Mm-hmm.
made sure that we made sure to go out to do the site visits. Now you look at these foundations now, they're like, put it in the little, put it on online on the app, you know what I mean? We'll look at it.
Yeah.
And, just missing those warm pieces of what philanthropy is about.
Right.
Just, the site visit is an amazing tool to show
Yeah.
people that you care, and
Mm-hmm.
also that we read your proposal and
Right.
we wanted to, dig a little deeper than just looking at the concentric circles of just if you have the
Right.
best development director in the world from
Y-
Brookline
Right.
that could
You got to
write.
see what's really going on,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. So I appreciate that approach. Well, I know a lot of bits and pieces about the good work you've done over the years. So many things we can talk about. But I realize I don't know a lot of your backstory, like what motivated you to get into this work. Is it something that built up, or is there like a moment or a person in your life that really set you
Uh,
on the path?
um, I would say growing up in the greater Boston area, I have family in Boston and Cambridge, but I grew up in Cambridge, is that I think my backstory is really about the college and the universities that are around here. Is
Hmm.
that as a kid, I was able to go onto Harvard's campus and MIT conference, and I had the best tutors and the best role models. Um,
Excellent.
Ever. You know what I mean?
Mm,
For math and science
yeah.
and just basic. And I also was able to participate in a lot of programming at those institutions, um,
Hmm.
even at Northeastern and BU in high school. So seeing that kind of large kind of support about young people and access has always kept me in the fray of always really trying to push college access and mentoring and so forth. Because one thing I have the best role models ever out there,
That is
ever
excellent.
out there. And I wanted to make sure that I carry on that tradition. And that's why a lot of my work in nonprofit was at the State of Young Black Boston, maybe at the
Hmm.
National Black College Alliance, and now at Greatest Minds, has always kept that as a cornerstone of the work that we do, is to show people heroes and fabulous people in action at all ages. So people don't kind of, say, oh, I got to be like this person way down when I'm, nope, we want to let you see
Hmm.
somebody that's 19 going through it, 24 that's going through it, 32 that's going for it, 40 going through it. So we want them to see them at all ages.
Oh, that makes a ton of sense. And now I really see that leads right into, I mean, I was going to ask you your motivation for starting Greatest Minds. It sounds like you started telling me, but tell us a little bit more about how that works. And I think that was one of my other earlier points of intersection. Amanda Richardson, I believe,
Yes,
knew
yes.
you through that, and she's on our board now. I don't know if you know that.
Oh,
So,
what? That's
yeah.
Can you
Uh,
believe someone that becomes an intern, AmeriCorps Corp person? See, that's exactly the
hmm
concept of what Greatest Minds is about.
Yeah.
It's about having those relationships and as you see with SCI, is carrying those through so
Yep.
people can see the full spectrum of what it means to be involved in the community.
hmm
I'm very proud of that, and very proud of Amanda and knowing her for, geez, 20, yeah, 16, 17 years.
Yeah. Yeah. That is great. Yeah, so it's interesting. You've really lifted up an interesting point. I think sometimes we do think of the mentors as the wise sage that's maybe like us, sort of we'll call it mid-career. Been through doing work for decades, but it's almost like seeing people at different points along the way. Have you seen? Do you sort of intentionally build that into Greatest Minds, or other
Oh,
things you do?
100%.
Yep.
That's the whole kind of program model or theory of change. And
Yeah. All
places like
right, draw
me,
that up for us.
but hey, yeah. My thing, and I always like to quote Robert Lewis, who's now at the Boys and Girls Club. He would say something, and I used to laugh, is that some people go and do these long, extensive evaluations of programs. But he says,
Right.
you know what? I can go in a room and watch 95% of the kids. If they're smiling, that's a good program.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're
there you
gonna have
go.
5% that are hating, but you
Yeah.
know what? But that's I can watch and see what a good program is, and so
hmm
got to remember people that is that go out there, give your best, show yourself, and show young people that if I can do it, you can do it.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. And how do you look at approach and think about, I mean, I know a lot of the work you've done centering access for folks of color, young, you mentioned different initiative revolving around like young Black men and stuff. So where do how do you, and in social capital terms, we talk about bonding and bridging social capital. You find yourself most centering on that kind of finding mentors that look like you, or you kind of see a blended approach, or how do you think about
No, I
that?
mean we use a blended approach. I mean, it's very important that we it's interesting for young people that are, might be frightened to go to a Harvard program or an MIT program, is
hmm
that we bring them over there to be able to branch out and, go to the Museum of Science and
Oh
meet some
yeah.
mentors over there, go to different programs that are all around the city. So,
hmm
it's a blended approach, but you got to have um, some really warm and kind hands around you. One
Yeah.
thing that I also realize is that there are a lot of kids that have never been to the other side of the red line, meaning
Oh
that
yeah.
they just
hmm
get right off at Park Street and call it a day.
Right.
And so one thing is that we've been bringing people over to Harvard and MIT, but also we've been stopping off at other parts, Savin Hill, you know what I mean?
Good.
And
Yeah.
people walk around. There's some great restaurants over there. They didn't
Yeah.
realize there's a great restaurant right across the street in
Right.
Savin. So we brought them over there. So we're trying to push people outside of their comfort zone. And especially right
hmm
now, after COVID, a lot of people have retreated. I've watched a
Yeah.
lot of young people, before back in the day in the 2000s, I was like, let's go to the movies downtown. And then like
hmm
50 students will come with me.
Yeah. Right.
Now it's just like, what? Can't we just do it online? And
Yeah.
so, we have to get really creative now and so forth. But I think one of the best things that I've seen is we've had a couple of programs and t-shirt campaigns that were very successful. And a mother called me maybe 7 years after some of the teenagers were at college and they wanted to start their own t-shirt thing. And
hmm
she said she was listening in the other room, and the three young men that were in my program were like, we got this product. How would Chip do it?
Yeah.
And I was like, my mother
Nice.
called me, and I was like, whoa. You know what I mean? I thought that was the biggest compliment. But, and I think that's what social capital and
Mm-hmm.
Greatest Minds and all those different places about is that, giving people the utility belt
Yep.
to like Batman and Batgirl having
Right,
the
right.
utility belt. They might
Mm-hmm.
not need it right away, but
Yeah.
for the pull from it when they're in these different situations.
Yeah. That's great. And I think the smile is a great test of a good program, but to go another level, I think, if you're somebody's retaining something that, they're exposed to through your program 5, 10 years later, then you're really doing something right. So that is awesome.
I know that was really happy. A mother just said, hey, I just want you to let you know. They were quoting you in their business meetings. And
That
I'm
is
like,
great.
what?
That is awesome. Well, now I know you also are wearing some academic hats, and so I want to hear more about that. I don't know if it's been a couple of years you've been a visiting center at the Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation. So what's that all about? What are you doing there?
And
And
a
I'm
great
not,
name.
yeah.
It makes you want to stay. And it was supposed to be a year, but now it's on year 4. So I've been
Okay.
having a blast over there. They've been enjoying me as well. Um, just bringing very different perspectives on, especially that works very much about democracy and how it fits in our society and different around the world, and how
Hmm.
people are trying to bring together people around voting rights,
Yeah.
about thinking about people's participation and civic participation as well. Um, so I've been having a blast over there.
Mm.
And Harvard, and also Harvard's never heard anyone's resume, as my mother and father would always say.
Yeah,
But
no, it doesn't.
it's been a real great time with scholars I'm meeting locally and also around the world. Is that we get together and share different resources and networks, share papers, go to different conferences together, hear different lectures together, and it's a great place to learn. And
Yeah.
so I've been also doing a lot of teaching as well about, a lot of times, a lot of our discussions are about in Georgia, where I was
Hmm.
at Georgia State for several years and worked with
Yep.
a large amount of student population down there. And so, got to bring the kind of the hands and feet of how does it look like from Georgia, but also I also have the local presence of
Hmm.
Boston, being a Meninoite for
Oh yeah,
many.
I noticed somewhere as I was prepping for this a good picture of you with
Oh
with the
yeah.
mayor.
So yeah. So, but I really want to say is that, and one thing is that I love Boston and Cambridge because we have a very strong and robust civic nonprofit community.
Right.
If you go to other places like Florida and Texas and even Atlanta, it's usually just a United Way, uh,
Hmm.
some churches, and maybe a crop center or something like that,
Yeah.
that's really leading the way and doing all the work down there. But one thing
Hmm.
is that in the greater Boston, we have neighborhood groups and civic associations and nonprofits and entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs, which gives that mix up,
Right.
uh, to really have a really push and strong economy, but also a strong civic voice. So I've enjoyed that, and that's been something that has been a big factor for me to even go out there and even start my own. Is that, I got a lot of great support. And I try to tell like young people, it's very hard. Like, I'm gonna say this real clear. If I didn't have those resources and networks that I had for, working at the Boston for 4 years, I would
Hmm.
never have been able to start my nonprofit.
Right. Yeah.
And so we have lots of young people that have these great ideas
Hmm.
that just haven't been in the room with
Right.
different funders and so forth. But luckily, I've had that opportunity.
Hmm.
And I was able to start my nonprofit at 29 years old.
Yep.
But now is that, I'm trying to push the next generation and get them in the same rooms to be
Right.
able to start and having those discussions and so forth.
Yeah, that access is key. I was thinking about that again at all levels, like the exposure to those institutions of higher ed, but then, that's you got to take that next step, what are you doing after you get that degree? How do you
Right.
get
Right.
get in the rooms? Yeah, and being mindful of like how do I bring more folks into the room that have similar perspectives and backgrounds.
And there's no magic bullet. People got
Yep,
to realize that is that some people believe that they go meet a donor and they can get a check in the next 2 months. It doesn't work like that.
right.
Donor cultivation is the
Hmm.
key. as you know.
Yes.
You
Yeah,
know,
it would be nice if the checks just came that easy, but it's
yeah,
work.
but, it's a relationship. It's you being
Hmm.
in the same room with them several times, them seeing you in action, you seeing them in action, going back and forth,
Yeah,
sharing different news articles, letting them see you on LinkedIn and all
right.
the other pieces. That's
Yep.
what builds those relationships. Just like,
Right.
and that's in anything, maybe.
Hmm.
And it's interesting, philanthropy back in the day was so much about bequests,
Oh yeah.
people
Hmm.
leaving their estate and all that. Now, as the 2000 going forward, is that we have all these living donors that are coming right with the resources and the money and the networks.
Yeah, yeah, big time. And do they want to see it in their lifetimes, whether it's like Mackenzie
Whoa,
Scott or other
yes,
folks? Yeah.
yes,
What?
yes. So
Yeah.
it's a new, I was a part of the old philanthropy network,
Yeah.
and the new philanthropy came in right after 2000 plus. And so,
Hmm.
I kind of, savor the older days.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's a whole new game these days.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. And I think, I'm at the point too, the majority of our team at SCI are a good bit younger than I am. So it is blending like certain things, they bring great ideas and perspectives, but then it's like, certain things of,
You got
showing
to
up,
show up and do the work.
yeah. And it's also like in the philanthropy case, oh, I'll say, did so and so respond? Oh, I sent an email. I guess they're not interested. I'm like, you got to
No!
get on the phone, can you see them at something?
Yes,
It's like,
yes, you got to show what meeting they're going to be at. All right, we're going to
exactly.
be at the same meeting. All right, all right,
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
them in person.
Yeah. I know lately I've been, we've got a few things where we're actively courting sponsors, and I'm like, I just look at my calendar, this regular weekly 7 a.m. network. I'm like looking at who my pending. Like I could send them an email or they might be there. I might have coffee with them. I think that's gonna be need to set the alarm early for that.
It's so funny. I remember this is an old name, Frida Garcia.
Oh yeah.
Told me when she was doing with Eustace and Harriet Tubman House, she
Hmm.
would say, "You know what, Chip?" She said, "Chip, this is what I do." She said sometimes she would have to carve out time to, like, exactly what you said, to say, "I'm
Hmm.
doing this for my capital campaign. I can't give this commitment. I got to do these follow-ups."
Yeah. Right.
And it was just very interesting hearing that from her as an older person in the game of fundraising and development,
Yeah.
about how crucial, by sitting there and making sure you do those calls, and you just can't send a blanket email and everyone just says hello and
Right. Right.
yeah. So I just love those times and so forth. But
Yeah.
it's been a great time at the Ash Center as I go back there. Really looking at actually today, I'm in Georgia. Uh,
Hmm.
I am but I'm at a reparations conference, but also the same time there's a Kamala Harris rally in Atlanta at the same time. So
Wow.
get
Big
a double
time.
hit, and then also I get to work with a lot of my students on the ground on Sunday of doing some voter registration, not voter registration, voter outreach, get out the vote, and all those other pieces.
Yeah, yeah, wow, that's a great place to be. We're recording this, by the way. You'll be listening after the election, but we're recording right be the weekend before the elections. And obviously, Georgia is a huge state. Any sense you're on the ground? I mean, and people can listen and check any thoughts on how Georgia specifically. And I know the large turnout was really key in that tight Georgia victory for President
Very much
Biden.
so.
So,
And you got to give all the props out to Stacey Abrams
oh
for
yeah.
putting her whole mind, body, and just everything into the game. It's interesting.
Hmm.
Went to college. She went to Spelman. I went to Morehouse.
Okay.
And it's also interesting. Senator Raphael Warnock was in my class at Morehouse
Oh
College.
really? Oh
We were in
wow.
political
Very
science
cool.
class together.
Oh, very
So,
cool.
so I'm glad to be cut of the same cloth with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's a
Very,
good
no,
crew
very proud of
to come
those
up
two.
with.
Very proud to come up with those two, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've been talking about trends in philanthropy. I know, of course, a lot of your work is looking at issues related to racial justice. And, we had, talking about, just even looking at a narrow window of time from, say, 2020, when it felt like maybe there's more receptivity to really making some headway on some of these things. And then the pushback. I mean, I guess to some extent, progress always is met with a little pushback. But I guess my two-part question for you, where do you see us on these topics at this current moment? You're at a reparations conference, and what gives you hope, despite obviously there's some pushback, whether it's in the election or just in
Right on.
policy?
I just think about that the first slaves that came over in the boat, and I bet the first thing they did is, when they got off the boat, is punch somebody in the face or revolted immediately.
Hmm.
And I just want to carry on that tradition of knowing that this is the long game
Yeah.
and it might not be in my lifetime, but I
Hmm.
just think about all the large and lots of people that have given their time and effort to this over the last 150, 200 years.
Yeah.
You think about Charles Ogletree, who was a good mentor of mine
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
that just passed
Wonderful.
very young, but
Hmm.
all the energy and support that he put into the Tulsa and race riots and trying to get
Hmm.
reparations for them, but also
Yeah.
just a number one all-star, just scholar activist professor. And
Yeah.
so as I continue on in the nonprofit field and also in the academia field, I look at Charles Ogletree and Lanny Guarnier and
Hmm.
some of those people as people to look up to about how to merge that and how to make that pieces about public policy as well and just stop being an armchair,
Right.
armchair sociologist or armchair uh,
Yeah.
professor. Is that you got
Hmm.
to be out there in the streets, and I always appreciated them and the time they've given me over the last 25 years and knowing both of them, but they both have just passed.
Yeah. That's that. But both sad in both cases. I had a chance to do Professor Ogletree did a session when I was in Lead Boston a number of years ago on school desegregation. Oh, with so much wisdom. Yeah. And yeah, people, it's interesting. I think that people who are able to blend that activism and the academics, that's pretty powerful in the sort of understanding of policy. I mean, almost like triangulating those things is powerful.
Oh, yes. And so, I hope that I'm living up to their legacy as they were living up to many other people's legacies in their own lives and so forth.
Hmm.
Charles Hamilton, you know what I mean? Um,
Hmm.
Lots of other people. The years of work at NAACP Urban League
Right.
and all those different organizations is that I hope to uh, be that inspiration for other people so they jump on when it's time for me as I got my last 30 summers left in this lifetime, it looks like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, well, you're doing great work to bring people along for sure, and inspiring and mentoring together. You've already given us some good tips, but any other kind of your best tips for how to really build people, bring people into the fold and work together toward common goals?
Well, I think there was a book called something like let me see, 30, I think you have 80, was it 80,000? There was some book that came out. It was on a TED Talk, and Malcolm Gladwell was about it, about talking with people about how they want to spend their time
Yeah.
and they want to use it and how much time you had in doing so. And
Hmm.
so I think the thing is that people gotta just be around the products and things that they do. If you want to be a fantastic golfer, fisher, all that other stuff, go
Yeah.
ahead and do that and build people and all that other stuff. If you want to be in the community building space, go ahead and do that to the best of your ability,
Right.
and do that. So I'm really supportive of people doing what they want to do and doing how they do best and so forth. Um, I think the next step for me in general is sharing that wisdom. I've been doing these conversations called generation conferences. We
Huh.
did one last year. We're going to do one this year where we brought together the Generation X, Y,
Oh,
Z,
cool.
baby boomers, and we
Yeah.
all in a room for 9 hours and just have
Wow.
people talk.
Hmm.
And it's interesting is that some older people feel like is that if they walk down the street, young people just don't even see them
Yeah. Yeah.
at all. They just totally off the
Hmm.
radar. And then young people say, "Well, I don't know what to say to an older person,
Oh, okay.
or I don't know, or any kind of talk." But it's interesting. One thing that I found is that we have these greatest minds shirt, and I got to get you one.
Cool.
Is that when students walk around with those, some
Hmm.
people are very familiar with the organization, so they know they're people that they can approach.
Oh, nice.
So they go, "Oh my God, you know Chip? Oh my God, no, 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 no."
That's excellent.
And it's like a badge of honor of,
Hmm.
and that's what I wanted. Something when I named the name Greatest Minds is that I wanted something that kids can walk around and when adults see them with that shirt on, they give them a nod, like I like that, I like
Oh,
that.
that's cool.
So that was kind of my main message of doing that, to make something that is, that spreads a smile and puts a smile on people's face.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love that. One thing when you're talking about all this intergenerational stuff, it must be on my mind because I was just talking with my colleague that I did this with a few years ago. Early on in SCI, one of our signature projects was partner with the local African American church and did something called the Civil Rights Forum. And the model was getting high school age kids together each week and getting to connect with mostly like just average everyday folks that were old enough to have been part of the movement in the 60s or 70s, and then brought in a few bigger names, for some, bigger events that brought drew in the crowds, and they just love that, kind of bringing that history to life and setting them up to really appreciate the wisdom and, wow,
Oh, let's talk about the work that you used to do. That was how I met you. What was the
yeah,
name
the
of the nonprofit you had?
intergenerational, exactly.
It was amazing. I sat back
Hmm.
and was like, wow, here is a whole group of people of people that are just possible mentors that
Hmm.
don't have a way to connect with people.
Right,
It's
right.
fabulous.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? Let's
Hey,
do it. Let's activate this population.
yeah, totally. So yeah, all that wisdom sitting there. And so we're both, yeah, working to make those connections. Yeah, that's great. Um, we're getting close to wrap up. I know you have a conference to get to, and before I ask for final words from you, is there any other work you've given some shout outs to some important leaders in your life and folks that any other um, groups or individuals you'd like to lift up as models or exemplars in these on
Well,
these
I think
topics?
one thing is that I'm we're a part of this reparations. I was appointed by Michelle Wu to be on a reparations task force.
Right.
There's
Yes.
like 6 of us on it right now, and we're doing the research
Hmm.
and realizing that this work is hard,
Yep.
uh, and also that it can be painful for people as well.
Right. Right.
So bringing up older histories, bringing up people's family experiences in Boston with racism, uh,
Yeah.
even though it sounds like a great and novel task to do, we have to also be realized that it brings up a lot of grief and trauma that people haven't been able to talk about. And
Yeah.
just want to put that out there as well. But there's some really good things going on. I'm excited. And one thing I try to, and you said this thing earlier about who kind of inspires you and all that. And I never told him this, but I think I'm gonna tell him, he'll see this interview, is that my dad, he was a football coach
Oh,
and
really?
from the high school. And as a kid growing up,
Hmm.
I would watch his go out there and watch him every week prepare these kids, and I'm like 7, 8, 9, and they would lose,
Yeah.
and they would lose, and they would lose,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they would lose.
Hmm.
And I'm like, well, as a kid, I'm like, Dad, why don't you just quit and all that other stuff? But you know what? In my head, I watched him every day get up in the morning, put his clothes on, get dressed, and be in front of those kids and teach them how to every day go out there and play the game for years. And
Yeah.
so days when I fall apart and say, up, I don't think I can do this again, I think about my dad and him going up and always in for the game, no
Mm.
matter what, and showing those kids you put your best foot forward and you
Hmm.
never, ever, 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 be scared. You show up
Hmm.
and you play the
Yeah.
game. And so that's been like a lot of my stuff with the nonprofit world as well, is that you show young people that you show up and be present and you show them the game. No matter how the funding goes, no matter
Hmm.
how staffing goes, no matter the volunteers go, you go up in there and you show the game.
That's a lot of great wisdom because you said earlier, how you start realizing that this is a long game here, and showing up consistently is and persistently is so key.
Yeah, man. And that's, I got to tell him that. He's 84
Yeah.
now,
Well,
I can't gas the man too much.
well, that is awesome. I mean, that's great wisdom to go out on, and it's been great catching up. I'm so glad we had a chance to connect, and I hope you have a great rest of the weekend in
Thank
Georgia.
you. Thank you so much, man. And we're going to keep democracy going, and whatever it is, we're going to learn new ways of how to bring people together. And I thank
Yeah,
you for this time and so proud of all the work that you do. And great. And I love it's so interesting. We didn't have this social media, so we get to check in on people and everything that
right.
they're doing. So, so proud of all the work that you do with all your colleagues over there at SCI.
Well, appreciate it, Chip. It's been so much fun. All right, take care.
All right, thank you.